Good evening. I'm Gary St. Hilaire, President and CEO of Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey. It gives me great pleasure to welcome all of you to Liberty Science Center's 9th Annual Genius Gala. LSC's mission of inspiring the next generation of scientists and engineers and helping prepare young people for STEM careers could not be more important to New Jersey and indeed to our country. Our state and our nation need more scientists, and the children visiting LSC now are our scientists of the future. A child who meets the endangered cotton-top tamarins in LSC's Wild About Animals exhibition hall might become a wildlife conservationist. A 12-year-old girl who visits LSC's Microbes Rules exhibit might grow up to be an immunologist who wards off a future pandemic. That's the power of LSC, to get learners of all ages excited about the power and promise of science and technology. This evening's gala is called I Stand for Science. The COVID-19 crisis only underscores the importance of science and technology to our collective well-being and future. Before COVID-19, Liberty Science Center was the fastest growing established museum in the United States. Not just the fastest growing science center, the fastest growing museum of any kind. In 5 years, LSC's attendance grew 65% to more than 750,000 annual visitors. On March 13, 2020, LSC closed its doors to the public because of the pandemic, while New Jersey schools shut down in early April and remain closed for the rest of the school year. Few teachers were prepared to continue the semester virtually, and it was hard for them to hold the interest of their students on screen for an entire school day. That's where LSC, drawing on its longtime expertise in distance learning, stepped up in a significant way. LSC educators developed and delivered a suite of live, engaging virtual STEM programming to New Jersey students and educators. From April 1 to June 30, a total of 5,668 K-12 students participated in LSC virtual science classes, which were offered free first to schools in the state's lowest income communities. 123 teachers completed virtual professional development programs at Liberty Science Center, and 19,606 children and adults in New Jersey participated in the center's virtual family STEM programming. Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey has been a supporter of LSC since the center opened in 1993. We've always supported LSC's devotion to the young residents of our state's most vulnerable neighborhoods. This year, we are proud of LSC for taking a lead role in helping our children continue their STEM learning arc virtually during the COVID-19 shelter-in-place. I know you'll enjoy tonight's celebration of genius, creativity, the youth of New Jersey, and Liberty Science Center. It's that genius that makes it easy for each of us to say, I stand for science. Now, one example of that genius is the Jennifer Charleston Planetarium, which LSC opened 3 years ago. At 110 feet in diameter, it is the largest planetarium in the entire Western Hemisphere. Interestingly, the same software that runs LSC's giant planetarium can also create an astronomy show on your computer screen or mobile device. Here to reveal the wonders of the night sky is LSC Senior Planetarium Educator Andrew Bundus.
Thank you, Gary. During these times when we are apart from one another, one thing that everyone all around the world experiences the same way is the beauty of the night sky and the wonder of space. So tonight I wanted to share with you 3 things that you can step outside and see tonight wherever you may be all around the world. To do that, let's step outside tonight about 2 hours after the sun goes down, once it's starting to get nice and dark. To find our first 2 planets, we're going to face toward the south. And in this part of the sky, you're going to find 2 pretty bright looking dots of light. But one of them is brighter than anything else in this part of the sky. This point of light right here is the largest planet in the solar system, Jupiter. Jupiter is large enough to fit the Earth inside of it about 1,300 times. It's made up almost entirely out of gas. and as a result is covered in storms, like the Great Red Spot that we're flying, well, awfully close to here. Our best tool to study Jupiter right now is the tiny little robotic spacecraft Juno. To keep itself safe from Jupiter's intense radiation, Juno spends most of its life millions of miles away. But every 53 days, it gets just a few thousand miles above the surface, allowing the spacecraft to photograph Jupiter in incredible detail. This image from a recent flyby shows just one of Jupiter's many storms, and in this almost textured-looking area toward the center here, we see newly discovered violent thunderstorms in the upper atmosphere. In this animation put together by NASA, we can see what it might be like to actually fly through one of these storms. Much like in thunderstorms on the Earth, updrafts from deep inside of Jupiter can carry things like water and other gases like ammonia up into the upper atmosphere. Here, those gases freeze into hailstones made of about 2/3 water and about 1/3 frozen ammonia. They form these weird Jovian hailstones that the scientists who made the discovery are calling mushballs, which I think is a pretty fantastic name. Looking back at the night sky now, still facing toward the south, if we look for another bright dot of light just to the left of Jupiter, we find the second largest planet in the solar system, Saturn. We know Saturn best for its beautiful rings, which are not made up of one solid piece as they appear to be in photos, but actually billions of tiny pieces of ice and rock, the remnants of an ancient moon ripped to pieces around 100 million years ago. Recent studies also tell us that in another 100 million years, these rings will have disappeared completely as the tiny fragments fall into the atmosphere of Saturn. Saturn is also home to more moons than any other planet in the solar system, boasting 82 of them. 20 of the moons have only been found in the past few years, so it's likely that Saturn has even more. One of its moons, Enceladus, is an icy moon, but thanks to gravitational tides coming from Saturn, the inside of Enceladus is warm, causing this ice to melt, leaving behind a huge liquid water ocean beneath the crust. The Cassini spacecraft flew through these geysers on the South Pole, which throw out water from this ocean out into space where they freeze into ice. Not to be outdone, though, by Jupiter's Great Red Spot, Saturn has a huge hexagon-shaped weather pattern on its north pole. This whole hexagon is larger than the entire planet Earth and contains inside of it numerous storms, including a violent hurricane at the center, with winds of almost 250 miles per hour. To find the third and final planet in the sky tonight, face toward the east, and it'll be rising just as it gets dark. Look for a pretty bright, reddish point of light, and you will have found the planet Mars. Mars is the subject of one of the most fascinating mysteries in the solar system. Around 3 or 3.5 billion years ago, Mars wouldn't have looked like the cold and dry desert we see today. It would have looked more like this. Covered in water, with an atmosphere to keep it warmer. Around this time, could Mars have developed life? Well, we really aren't sure. This past July, NASA launched a new rover to help us find out, named Perseverance. It still has quite a ways to go and is set to land on Mars this coming February. Its target on Mars is a location called Jezero Crater. Jezero Crater used to be a lake, and we know that water on the Earth is vital to life, so we hope by inspecting a place we know used to be full of water, we give ourselves the best location to find evidence of ancient life. Once on the surface, Perseverance will study Mars using a drill to take soil samples, and will feature a helicopter named Ingenuity to scout ahead for future promising locations for study. Thank you all so much, and I hope wherever you may live around the world, you have some clear skies to be able to check out those 3 planets. We also hope someday soon to see you in our actual planetarium. Information about our planetarium shows and tickets are available at lsc.org. In the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your night and enjoy the rest of our virtual Genius Gala.
Hello everyone, I'm Marco Tempest. I'm a cyber illusionist and a friend of Liberty Science Center. Welcome to LSC's first virtual Genius Gala. I'd like to start the event with a little experiment. It's inspired by a popularizer of science, Martin Gardner. Gardner specialized in mathematical recreations. He was also a magician. The following began with an article that Gardner published in Scientific American magazine. So let's begin. We're going to do a little traveling, and I want you all to help. At the end of this trip, we'll arrive at a destination. But first, we need a starting point for our journey. In a moment, I want you to choose one of these squares. Don't tell me, just pick one and put your finger on it. That's right. Come close to the screen and put your finger on any of the 4 squares. Done that? Great. Keep your finger there. Now, I don't know if you have a touch screen, but even if you did, it wouldn't help me. But to make things even more difficult, let's add some more squares. That's our neighborhood. But let's get more specific. 9 planets, and we're going to choose one at random. You still have your finger on the screen and it's touching one of these planets. In a moment, I will ask you to move your finger from planet to planet. You will be able to move side to side. You can move up or down, but you cannot move diagonally. Got that? Let's begin. Move your finger 2 times from one planet to another. Side to side, up or down, it's your choice. Keep your finger on the screen when you're finished. Excellent. Now, I don't know why, but I don't think your finger is resting on Pluto. To be honest, Pluto shouldn't even be here. Sorry, Pluto, you've been downgraded to a dwarf planet. You're out of the game. 8 planets remain. Let's try a longer journey this time. I want you to move your finger 5 times, starting now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm not getting any signs of life from Jupiter. Jupiter is out of the game. Let's try moving 2 times again. Do it now. 1, 2. I don't know how to say this, but you don't have your finger on Uranus. It's gone. Move 3 times this time. 1, 2, 3. And I'm gonna get rid of Neptune and Mercury. 4 planets remain, and your finger is on one of them. Move 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Wonderful. You briefly passed Venus, but you're not there now. So let's take Venus away. We are down to 3 planets, but you only get to make 1 more move. Everyone move once. And if I'm right, you're not on Saturn and you're not on Mars. I think you traveled around the galaxy and returned home. You're on what Carl Sagan called the pale blue dot. You're on Earth, right? And you returned to this very special place, which is very dear to all of us. Thank you, Martin Gardner, for the inspiration, and a big thank you to you for playing along. It's now my pleasure to introduce our host for the evening, the President and CEO of Liberty Science Center. Paul Hoffman is the award-winning author of 11 books, including the international bestsellers The Man Who Loved Only Numbers, published in 17 languages, and a memoir about the world of competitive chess called King's Gambit, a son, a father, and the world's most dangerous game. A gifted storyteller, Paul has given hundreds of radio, television, and online interviews about science and technology. Chicago Magazine once called him the smartest man in the world. But Paul says the editors must have caught him on a particularly good day. Paul has led Liberty Science Center for the past 9 years through 3 exciting renovations and expansions. The creation of the largest planetarium in the Western Hemisphere, the addition of the Stevens Institute of Technology energy-efficient shore house, and the construction of the brand new Weston Family Art and Science Pavilion. A 4th expansion, Dino Dig Adventure, will open next spring. Now, being a science communicator is a rarer profession than being a scientist. And Paul has a particular talent for explaining abstruse sciences like quantum mechanics, cosmology, mathematical catastrophe theory, and topology. Paul may be embarrassed that I'm now going to out his alter ego, Dr. Krypton. That's Krypton, spelled with a C, like cryptic. So let's take a look at this clip of Dr. Krypton in his 20s.
Thank you. My next guest is puzzle editor of Science Digest, and some of his best puzzles have been collected right here in this book, Dr. Krypton and His Problems. Please welcome the man of the same name, Dr. Krypton. Doctor, how are you? Nice to see you.
Can you figure out what would happen if I cut this in half and then cut the Mobius strip in half?
Life as we know it would come to an end.
Let's see. I mean, the same kind of ability to visualize in your mind's eye what happened is what's necessary to, like, solve Rubik's Cube or be a chess master. Okay, there's half the cut. I'll make the other one.
Are all of these puzzles contained in the book we looked at earlier?
No, some of them are,
Yeah.
and a lot more. If you help me straighten this out, we'll find it's a square.
Good heavens.
Maybe.
Unbelievable.
I think it's,
Very nice. Very nice.
And now, please welcome, with a lot less hair, Paul Hoffman.
Wow, where did it all go? Thank you for the very kind introduction. Tonight, LSC will bestow Genius Awards on 3 singularly brilliant women and men of science. We'll also meet several COVID-19 challengers, scientists and public health leaders who are challenging the virus and challenging our preconceptions about the virus. Normally, 750 of LSC's friends and supporters come together in person at our Genius Gala. But of course, it's not yet safe for 750 people to dine indoors together. So we're doing this virtually. I'm here at LSC, standing in the Jennifer Cholsky Planetarium, and it's kind of fun to have the run of the place to myself, all 300,000 square feet of LSC. Rather than speak to you from behind a podium, as I would if our gala were in person, I'm going to wander around and host the evening from some of my favorite spots. As much as I'd like to break bread with you right now, a virtual gala has certain advantages. With no physical constraints, thousands of you are able to join us tonight, and scientists and other people from far-flung locations will be dropping into our virtual gala. After 26 weeks, a full half year of being closed owing to the pandemic, Liberty Science Center reopened to the public on Labor Day weekend, and I'm happy to report it's been going exceptionally well. To keep our guests and staff safe, we closed off the highest touch exhibits and added new no-touch and low-touch immersive experiences, and required mask wearing and social distancing and limited capacity to less than 25%. Who doesn't love a good explosion? We built a transparent boom room from bulletproof glass, and at boom time, several times a day, we teach guests about explosions and blast waves by blowing up watermelons and pumpkins and other ill-fated vegetables and fruits. We also position the Hum Rider, a souped-up Jeep Cherokee that can literally rise up and over traffic outside LSC to introduce our guests to the age-old technology of hydraulics. Thank you, Jelly Media and Verizon, for donating this one-of-a-kind car to LSC. I could use the Hum Rider tonight when I brave the New Jersey Turnpike later to drive home. We've introduced a contact tracing workshop at LSC to demystify how public health investigators follow and contain the spread of COVID-19. And we're featuring more live animals. We have over 110 different species in pop-up demonstrations throughout the center. You can come to LSC and watch a chinchilla take a dust bath. I learned that chinchilla fur is so dense that if the animal takes a bath in water, its fur might never dry and get moldy. Come to LSC and watch our purple pincher hermit crabs deftly navigate a miniature playground of wooden ladders, nets, and platforms. Why are these crabs so agile and mobile out of the water? Because in their native Caribbean habitat, they're known to travel 10 miles in search of their favorite meal, iguana feces. Yum! The things you learn at Liberty Science Center. During the 26 weeks of COVID-19 closure, we had to keep our crustaceans, our mammals, our birds, our reptiles, our amphibians, and our fish safe and fed. LSC's dedicated team of animal handlers came in each day during COVID to care for the furry, the scaly, the feathered, and the finned. NBC ran a piece on one of our animal caregivers, Nicole Conklin. Let's take a look.
When the public's away, the monkeys will play. Actually, these are cotton-top tamarins, and they live at the Liberty Science Center in Jersey City. They are among the many animals just hanging out in the empty museum, missing their adoring fans terribly. That's where Nicole Conklin comes in. She is on the museum's animal husbandry team.
We're just doing a little bit extra, and it provides them mental stimulation, it provides them physical stimulation.
The goal, of course, is to get eager learners back at the museum in person as soon as it's safe for them to be here. In the meantime, Nicole's got it covered.
I'm in our Hudson home, LSC's exhibition hall about the fragile and resilient ecosystem of the Hudson River Basin. Look at these huge drumfish. Our staff caught them right outside LSC. I grew up along this same stretch of the Hudson River on the other side and never knew that 90-pound drumfish were lurking nearby. Every day I learn something interesting at Liberty Science Center. That's why I love my job and why you should come visit us. It's time for our first Genius Award. Presenting the award will be Mike and Sarah, Senior Vice Chair and America's Deputy Managing Partner, EY, one of the center's strongest corporate partners. This will be the 6th year that EY has played an important role as a corporate chair of LSC's Genius Gala, as well as being the first founding partner of SciTech City, an important project for New Jersey and indeed the world that I'll tell you more about later.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Paul. As it is each year, it's my great pleasure to represent EY here this evening as we celebrate genius. I've always thought of the LSC Genius Gala as not just a celebration of these particular individuals, but as a much larger celebration of science, creativity, and innovation. While the word creative is often associated with artists, I think we fail to recognize how creative scientists truly are. For example, while Da Vinci is widely recognized for his great works of art, few people recognize he was also a brilliant inventor and a scientist. Da Vinci's concise and detailed study of a wide variety of subjects and disciplines gave us not only great art and futuristic inventions, but a new scientific method that was used well into the 19th century. Tonight, it's my great pleasure to introduce our first honoree of the evening, Dr. William Conan Davis, whose brilliance and creativity has touched our lives in many ways. Until now, many of you would not have recognized. So let's roll the video and learn a little bit about Dr. Davis.
The next time you enjoy soft-serve ice cream, instant mashed potatoes, perfect potato chips, or Dasani water, you can thank biochemist William Conan Davis. Dr. Davis's path to becoming a food scientist was not easy because he was born at a time and place, 1926, in rural Georgia, when African Americans were discouraged from doing scientific research. As a boy, he spent summers with his Sioux grandfather, whom he describes as a natural ecologist without formal training, hunting and farming on the edge of the Okefenokee swamp. His father, a railway crew boss and self-taught herbalist of Ethiopian Jewish descent who read Hebrew and not English, endured Ku Klux Klan threats and established an herbal pharmacy to serve blacks in Georgia who did not have access to medical care. To expand his young son's horizons, his father drove him 300 miles to Alabama's Tuskegee Institute to attend a workshop with Henry Ford and George Washington Carver, the most famous black scientist of his day, who had restored fertile soil to the South by introducing crop rotation. Seeing African American professors and scientists in action inspired Davis to become a research chemist. His older brother, Ossie Davis, would take a different career path, becoming an actor, director, and civil rights advocate. William Davis was drafted into the Korean War as a second lieutenant in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and in 1953 was awarded the Purple Heart. He returned to the Tuskegee Institute in 1956 to earn a Master of Science in Organic Chemistry. Davis was determined to pursue a PhD in applied chemistry, an extremely difficult goal at the time for an African American. Blacks who excelled in science were encouraged to go into teaching, not research. The University of Idaho was the only institution in 1960 willing to admit him to a research track doctoral program, and he became the university's first black PhD. At the university in Moscow, Idaho, the state's official vegetable, the Idaho potato, became the subject of his research. I was studying the rate at which potatoes sloughed or broke down, Davis says. A soup company wants a potato with a long shelf life. When they put a chunk of potato in a can, they want it to still be a chunk when that can is opened perhaps months later. Others, Davis said, want potatoes that fall apart easily and whip up light and fluffy for mashed potatoes. It was fun, and we sometimes worked all night on the problem. That summer, to make money, he took a job at nearby Washington State University, helping their industrial research department understand why larch trees were gumming up saw blades in lumber mills. William Davis isolated a polysaccharide called arabinogalactin, a gooey, soluble dietary fiber that stuck to the saws. He extracted the larch tree, arabinogalactin, as a dry crystalline powder. Initially, he could see no practical use for the powder. Rehydrating it merely created an uninteresting, sticky mess. Back in Idaho, Davis was trying to engineer an improved potato chip that didn't blister when fried. He succeeded in identifying the substance responsible for the blistering, but when he extracted it from the potatoes, they disintegrated. When he added water to the potato flakes in order to reconstitute them, the result was an unappetizing goop. He was a failure as a researcher, he decided. He couldn't improve potato chips, and he couldn't imagine a use for arabinogalactin. And then it occurred to him to add the arabinogalactin to the potato flakes. Voila! The desiccated potatoes fluffed up into an edible starch that held together. His serendipitous discovery led to instant mashed potatoes, and then to soft-serve ice cream. Arabinogalactin became the glue that holds particle board together, and now also has a variety of uses in cosmetics, medicine, and oil production. PhD in hand, Davis turned his research attention to the biochemistry of human health, studying hay fever antigens, developing standard blood tests in the fight against diabetes, and spending nearly 15 years as director of United Medical Laboratories in Portland, Oregon. Always conscious of social inequities, he worked with the Black Panthers in the early 1970s to establish a free medical clinic in the underserved Portland neighborhood of Albina and educated African Americans about sickle cell anemia. In 1983, he joined the chemistry department of St. Philip's College in San Antonio, Texas, where he became a full professor and chair of the natural sciences department and worked on renewable energy. He also studied the characteristics of drinking water and water purification and co-created the formula for Dasani brand water. After his retirement from St. Philip's in 2009, the Natural Sciences Building was named in his honor.
Dr. Davis, I didn't know until now that water truly had a flavor. Your life and your work is an inspiration to all of us and to the next generation of young scientists. Thank you for all of that. And on behalf of the Liberty Science Center, I have the great honor of presenting you with the 2020 Genius Award.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. I am enjoying right now a soft ice cream cone thanks to arabinogalactin in you. It's really good. So I understand that when you were a child, you got to meet George Washington Carver and Henry Ford. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? What was that like, and how old were you?
I was approximately 10 or 12 years old as a kid. And this motivated me to go into science. It inspired me because of my dad took us over there to the workshop, and I was very much impressed. It changed my life that I knew then what I wanted to pursue.
Tell me a little bit about your grandfather.
Yeah, my grandfather was from Ethiopia and Europe. He was extracting stuff from leaves and stuff like this, and this stuff he was hoping that it be used for some healthcare reason.
And your father also did work, right, in healthcare at one time, starting herbal pharmacy?
Yeah. And my father was influenced by him. He would take roots from a plant and extract it. And the root solution, he would sell this to people who had illnesses. So I was surrounded by people who was in science.
Are you encouraged by, recent social movements like the, wide acceptance of Black Lives Matter? Do you think that's going to lead to fundamental change?
Yes, because I think this is very important, and for us to know we're all brothers and sisters, and that we should understand, just because of your color, that this does not make you any better or any worse than anyone else.
Dr. Davis, this has been such a pleasure to spend some time with you this evening.
Thank you very much for the activity that you've allowed me to participate in, and to let young people know that science is very important and that we are going to need them to become involved, because the world has become very technical, okay? And for them to know that, anyone has the potential of becoming a scientist. Just because you are Hispanic or you are Afro-American, it does not make you less able to become a scientist.
Thank you, Dr. Davis, and thank you, Mike and Sarah. As you know, tonight's Genius Gala is called I Stand for Science. I stand for science because I literally owe my life to science. 15 years ago, I contracted pertussis, also known as whooping cough, from children in upstate New York who were not vaccinated. I was inoculated against pertussis as a young boy, but the immunity it granted me had diminished. In addition to pertussis, and it's a really nasty illness, where you cough so violently, it's hard to breathe and you can fracture ribs. I contracted strep throat and a bacterial pneumonia, both thankfully curable by modern pharmaceutical science. I would have been much sicker if I hadn't been vaccinated as a child, and now the protocol is to revaccinate. The World Health Organization estimates that vaccines saved more than 10 million lives in 5 years alone from 2010 to 2015. I stand for vaccines, I stand for antibiotics, I stand for science.
Hey everybody, Governor Phil Murphy here. It is my honor to congratulate this year's Liberty Science Center Genius Gala honorees, Dr. William Conan Davis, Dr. Jennifer Lewis, Moshe Safdie, the COVID challengers working at the forefront of the fight against COVID-19, and our 3 outstanding New Jersey high school student honorees. There is no denying that our world has been changed by the COVID-19 pandemic. Among the many obstacles this pandemic has brought, however, we have also acquired a new appreciation for those working in the field of science to develop new solutions to complex and often life-threatening problems. For so long, the heroes that our children admired and aspired to be like have worn capes or possessed superpowers. But I'm certain that this generation of young people will grow up wanting to wear stethoscopes, perform experiments and studies, and develop vaccines capable of giving every human being on Earth the superpower of good health. These women and men who have dedicated their lives to the pursuit of scientific knowledge for the betterment of humankind are deserving of our respect and admiration, and thanks to their work, I am able to look forward to celebrating with all of you in person next year. Again, congratulations to tonight's honorees. God bless each and every one of you.
Thank you, Governor Murphy, and thank you for your leadership in harnessing science to lead our state through the pandemic. I've switched locations to our Microbes Rule exhibit. Now it's time to meet our first COVID challenger, Dr. Jeanette Kowalik, Health Commissioner of the City of Milwaukee. Last summer, Milwaukee became the first city in the nation to declare racism to be a public health crisis. Since then, some 80 U.S. cities and counties have followed Milwaukee's lead. Dr. Kowalik? Good evening, Commissioner.
Hi, Paul.
So you've described our response to COVID as a backlash against science and common sense. Can you elaborate on that?
Absolutely. So as a local health officer, I'm responsible for the health of my city. So it's about 600,000 people. And then when we declared the pandemic emergency, I became responsible for the whole county, so 1 million people. And considering the circumstances, an outbreak, a pandemic, many of the decisions that we make are based off of the information that we have at the time. But there has been a lot of misinformation and attempts to turn COVID into a political tool to divide our country, our community, and it's been extremely challenging.
Tell me some of the misinformation.
Oh, well, initially, there were rumors that African Americans or Black people could not get COVID. And that created some issues for us early on because most of the focus was on international travelers. So there was guidance that if you traveled to those level 3 countries, that you were at risk or you needed to quarantine, but not much else for anyone else. So initially, some of our first cases had acquired the virus through domestic travel.
So it came out of your and Milwaukee's work, did it not? The sort of transformation about thinking about the disease, that it was just travelers to far-flung lands, and that people most at risk seemed, middle-aged Black Americans. Did that not come out of the work in Milwaukee?
Yes, so we were doing daily briefings early on, like most other jurisdictions. And at one of our daily briefings, we discussed the issue that most of our cases, our first hotspot was in an African American part of Milwaukee, which is where I grew up, Sherman Park, by the way. And then others started to question what's going on in Milwaukee. Normally when you see an outbreak, the outbreak is associated with some type of event, such as a party, a wedding, a funeral, something along those lines. So there was an assumption that, hey, maybe this was related to something. But we didn't have additional information that what we were seeing was related to racism playing out through the social determinants of health through the pandemic. So that didn't come about until other jurisdictions started to share their COVID data by race and ethnicity, and we started seeing similar trends where Black and Latinx and indigenous communities were being hit hardest by COVID-19.
Is there any special advice, we deal with a lot of young people here, any special advice you'd give to, particularly young Black girls that might be thinking of going into the sciences?
Oh, absolutely. We need more of you, so please consider careers in the sciences. If you get excited about how things work, exploration, getting dirty if you're into like more of the environmental sciences, but just wanting to deconstruct things and understand how they work and then put things back together and improve things. Definitely consider a career in the sciences. My father was an engineer, And I thought that I wanted to be an architect at one point in time, but I thought, oh yeah, that there's too much math. And you know, there's these gender roles and biases that kind of play out in our lives, and it prevents us from kind of moving into things that may be a better fit for us. So eventually I found the sciences, even though I was someone that was told that I'm not good at math and I should consider other things. So push through.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure spending time with you.
Thank you. Likewise.
Tomorrow is Dr. Kowalik's last day as health commissioner of Milwaukee. She resigned, in part because of threats from white supremacists and discrimination she faced in the job, to take a position with a think tank in Washington, D.C., focusing on disparities in health policy. Our goal at LSC is to get children excited about science and on a path to STEM careers. We hope to inspire them to set their sights on becoming the next William Conan Davis or the next Jeanette Kowalik. Science is a very big tent. Science encompasses traditional fields like astronomy, physics, and biology, but also applied subjects like engineering, food science, medicine, architecture, biotech, and public health, and expanding new fields like robotics, data analytics, and artificial intelligence. My colleague, Ivory Williams, LSC's VP of STEM Education, will give you a taste of live virtual programs that LSC offered to students of different ages during COVID-19. Take it away, Ivory.
Thank you, Paul. I'm here in LSC's Maker Lab. We have a terrific team of STEM educators at LSC who are dedicated to the idea of STEM for all and to assisting educators in helping their students continue their STEM learning arc in these challenging times. Earlier, you met Andrew, one of our Planetarium educators. Here's Mike, the director of our Jennifer Chalsty Planetarium, showing a computer simulation of two galaxies merging.
And our two galaxies in 4.5 billion years are going to fuse together. So generally everything is expanding in the cosmos.
We have programs for early learners where we lead them in experiments in their homes. Here, Kingo is showing how to model the flight of maple seeds as they fall from trees.
And you want to try and make it look like this, and then you're just going to drop it and let it go. Okay? Now there's lots of different ways we can experiment with our maple seed model. One of them is to add our paperclip. Okay?
In a workshop for young learners on simple machines, Caroline demonstrates the concept of friction.
When I was rubbing my hands up and down together, my hands started getting a little warm. I felt the pressure between them. If I was using my hands to symbolize the friction and the resistance, my hand would be the shopping cart without wheels, and this would be the ground that I'm trying to push the shopping cart on.
Rosa is leading students in making paper airplanes so that they can learn about Bernoulli's principle and the physics of flight at home.
So you're going to create a paper airplane and you're going to test it afterwards.
We use live animals in many programs. Take a look at Fred teaching his pet and lab partner Colonel Quell how to make a tornado in a jar.
So now is the fun part. So I'm going to spin the jar really fast in my hands. You ready for this, Colonel Quell?
Our cotton-top tamarins, which are a very endangered species and live only in the wild in Colombia, get across the subject of wildlife conservation. One of our marquee programs is called Live from Surgery, in which students watch entire surgeries in real time through two-way video conferencing with New Jersey hospitals, all while conversing with the surgical teams during the operations. We also dissect cow's eyes, as Alejandro is demonstrating.
That thin, clear membrane is what we call the conjunctiva or the conjunctiva.
Between LSC's live virtual programs and our pre-COVID in-person offerings, we delivered live STEM programming this past year to 131,000 students in some 500 New Jersey schools. 120 of these schools were located in New Jersey's lowest income communities. We also provided STEM professional development programs to 300 teachers. LSC is ready for the new academic year. We offer dozens of live virtual STEM programs to support educators and students in New Jersey, and for that matter, anywhere in the world.
Thank you, Ivory. Educators unfortunately found that during the COVID school closures in April through June, some New Jersey children, disproportionately those in lower income communities, fell behind in reading and math. And so LSC has responded by building into our virtual STEM programs for this school year activities that also build math skills and literacy. LSC is a not-for-profit institution, and we've been closed for 6 months. We really depend on the generosity of our donors. There's a donate button on the page you're viewing, and if you like what you see and want to support our STEM education programs, please go to the donate button. I'm standing in front of LSC's Infinity Climber, our suspended cantilevered climbing structure that is 19 miles of protective steel thread to keep everyone safe. The climber helps young learners overcome fear of heights and build what's called proprioception, the sense of knowing where one's body is in space. At LSC, we know that learning comes from play. To mark the 40th anniversary of Rubik's Cube in 2014, LSC designed and created a traveling exhibition called Beyond Rubik's Cube to celebrate this puzzle toy of Hungarian origin, which became the world's most popular toy, selling more than 1 billion. When Beyond Rubik's Cube opened at LSC in 2014, it drove record attendance. The Empire State Building and the Bank of America Tower in New York City were illuminated in Rubik's Cube colors. EY's headquarters in Times Square featured Rubik's Cube art, and giant cubes were floated around Manhattan. Rubik's Cube is at heart a mathematical object, and LSC's exhibition turned young learners on to mathematics. Beyond Rubik's Cube delighted audiences in Cleveland, Ohio, Halifax, Canada, and Shanghai, China. I am pleased to announce that 6 years after our award-winning exhibition debuted at LSC, it is returning to the center next month to delight a whole new generation. The star of our exhibition in 2014 was our young speed cuber in residence, Anthony Brooks, who at LSC set the Guinness World Record for solving the most Rubik's Cube underwater in a single breath. He unscrambled 5 cubes, twisting the final cube with only one hand in 78 seconds. Please welcome back Anthony Brooks. Anthony, I got a cube for you.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, I think I've got it. I've attempted to mentally solve the cube already, and I think I've got it. The only way to prove that I've really solved it in my head is to attempt to blindfold myself and move through the entire sequence solving the cube. Ooh, I'm a little bit nervous. I don't know about you. Here I go. And I should be done, except for this piece and this one. Is that solved?
Voila, excellent.
Got it.
Sweet, very nice. I did mine blindfolded too. This is about my speed. Thank you, Anthony, very much. Appreciate it.
Gets one away, and so is Blake. And here comes Bo. But Gibson has the lead. Can Bo catch him? Yes! Usain Bolt! Woo! It's not supposed to be that easy, Tom.
This is the entrance and exit to LSC, what we call the cosmic portal. Do you hear the background soundscape? Do you know what it is? It's the universe. We're listening to the cosmos. NASA converted radio waves, plasma waves, and magnetic fields detected in space into these very sounds. To me, the music of the cosmos is kind of meditative. The grand scale of the universe makes me excited to update you on LSC's grandest initiative, SciTech City, the 30-acre world-class innovation campus to launch and grow dozens of science and technology companies and reimagine K-12 science education. As of this month, we've raised $26 million in philanthropy for SciTech City, thanks to a lead gift in December of $10 million from the Honorable Frank Guarini. And we have 3 blue-chip companies committed as founding corporate partners: Bank of America, EY, and Verizon. This week, we're issuing an RFP for a venture partner to fund and build the Scholars Village housing at SciTech City. And we're on a path to secure private and government funding to create a world-class public science high school, thanks to substantial charitable gifts from Laura and John Overdeck, the Paul and Phyllis Fireman Charitable Foundation, Josh Weston, Millie and Joe Williams, PSE&G, and other donors. We want to break ground on SciTech City next year and open the first major phase of this mini city of tomorrow in 2023. Let's go outside and visit the SciTech City land. We filmed it earlier at Magic Hour. I'm standing on the 12.5-acre parcel of land that Jersey City, through the visionary leadership of Mayor Stephen Fulop, donated to Liberty Science Center for SciTech City, where innovators, scientists, engineers, and students will come together to harness science and create a better future for all of us. Once the site of a car pound and a sewage facility, this overgrown land is adjacent to Liberty Science Center and 1,200-acre Liberty State Park. On this land, we'll build EdgeWorks, a 7-story facility that will include a state-of-the-art conference center, a gallery for bleeding-edge technology, and 4 floors of offices, R&D labs, and collaboration spaces for startup companies and individual entrepreneurs. We'll build Liberty Science High School, a science and technology high school for 400 teenagers who aspire to be scientists and rock the world. And a venture partner selected by us will build Scholars Village, residential and temporary housing for families, students, and innovators who want to join SciTech City's curated community of the future. And that's just the first phase in 2023. We have space for subsequent construction and still leave 5 open acres for a landscaped public commons. I've moved to the Weston Family Lab for Earth and space exploration in front of our planetarium. In this space, we teach learners of all ages about climate and Earth science by displaying data collected by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. The sun is on the sphere behind me now. It's time for our second Genius Award, and to present the award is Laura Overdeck, Vice Chair of LSC's board, founder and president of Bedtime Math, the trustee liaison to LSC's School Creation Council, and the incredibly generous donor who, along with her husband John, offered a $2.75 million matching challenge grant so that we could successfully raise $5.5 million for Liberty Science High School.
Good evening. When Paul first asked me to introduce our next honoree, I was thrilled to be asked, but also a little concerned about how this would all work. Making the leap from an iconic in-person event to a virtual celebration seemed like a bit of a stretch at this difficult time. But everyone at LSC was determined to make a fabulous event for our honorees and the individuals that we're celebrating tonight. So while we're saddened not to be celebrating Genius together in person, it's actually really cool that technology invented by geniuses is enabling us to be together in some way. By the way, that's why I stand for science. It's the everyday things we use, the gadgets we use, the medicines we take, every time you click the mouse. All of that is made possible by science, and the scientists who invented all those things are making our lives better every day. To that point, our next honoree has taken 3D printing to a place that we're sure its inventors never imagined was possible. And that's just a small part of her work and research at Harvard. So can we please see the video on Jennifer Lewis?
The human kidney has an exquisite architecture of 20 different cell types and 1 million tiny channels that filter blood. For the 100,000 people in the US alone waiting for a kidney transplant. There's no substitute for a real donor organ, yet. But thanks to bioprinting trailblazer Jennifer Lewis, someday we might manufacture replacement organs in a lab. I see the vision, she says, and I know what we have to do to get there. Lewis invents new materials, methods, and machines to build complex living tissue from scratch. Her machines are specifically designed 3D printers, kind of like the desktop appliances that squeeze out plastic parts layer by layer, but with microscopic precision and ink made of living cells. With her pioneering so-called fugitive or sacrificial inks, which wash away to leave empty space, she was the first to create bits of tissue complete with an intricate network of hollow tubes, similar to the channels and blood vessels or vasculature that a kidney or other organ would need to function. So far, she and her team have made small bits of vascularized tissue that live for a few weeks in the lab. Her path over the next few years: see if the tissue bits stay alive in animals, make bigger bits with one functioning unit or nephron of a kidney, a huge step that also be useful for testing new medicine. Then try to put together 1 million nephrons to achieve the ultimate grand challenge of an artificial kidney.
Every day we're doing something new, advancing the frontiers of both science and technology. It's very exciting to have that opportunity to see your ideas translate out of the lab beyond just research papers into something that really has impact on people's daily lives.
Lewis is expanding the possibilities of 3D printing in other ways too. What's really exciting about the 3D printing of materials is it gives you an entirely wide open design space, Lewis says. By developing new kinds of printable materials, including soft electronics, she's created shape-shifting objects, the adorable squishy Octobot, and a sensing hand that mimics a human's delicate grasp. A printhead she's designed can switch materials 50 times a second, as fast as a hummingbird beats its wings, so you can alternate hard and soft materials in minute patterns, enabling a robot with compressible feet and a wide range of other uses. Lewis's success comes from diving into and connecting disparate fields. Growing up with an engineer dad and a schoolteacher mom, she knew she wanted to be an engineer, but not what kind. Serendipity decided for her when the University of Illinois offered her a scholarship to study ceramic engineering. She'd never heard of it, but she ended up falling in love with the way it combined high-tech material science, engineering, and art. She earned her PhD in ceramic science from MIT and returned to the University of Illinois to run her own lab. Based on her breakthrough work 3D printing soft materials, Harvard recruited her in 2013 as its first WIS professor of biologically inspired engineering. She went with the goal of printing human tissue, even though she'd never grown living cells in her lab before, and her new postdoc had to show her how. Today she co-leads the WIS Institute's 3D Organ Engineering Initiative, a Boston-wide collaborative of researchers and doctors working toward the same goal. Lewis sees her lab as having two outputs: science and people. She takes great pride in mentoring her multidisciplinary team of students and postdocs and in helping them achieve their own goals. She says, "I think at the end of the day, that's one of the most important impacts we have."
Dr. Lewis, Liberty Science Center is pleased to honor you with the 2020 Genius Award.
I want to thank you very much for this distinguished honor. Thank you to the Liberty Science Center. And I'd especially want to say how humbled I am to receive this award along with two extraordinary honorees. I wouldn't be here today without the tremendous efforts of my graduate students, postdocs, and our collaborators who have helped transform the ideas into reality that we have pursued. Everything from 3D printing of soft, squishy robots to bioprinting of vascularized cardiac tissues that beat synchronously. I also want to thank a number of other people, my mentors, my teachers, especially my parents, who have instilled in me the values of hard work and the desire to continuously learn and grow. And I think it's these values that have really formed the foundation for my achievements and my life today. And lastly, I want to thank again the Liberty Science Center. In these crucial moments in time, I think science matters more than ever. And in the Liberty Science Center, the next generation of scientists are getting exposed to wonderful exhibits where they can learn by doing. And I'm really excited to see what they create in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. You design interesting materials. Tell us about the machines you make to print those materials.
Oh, certainly. So when you want to construct materials in 3 dimensions, you need to be able to start with a computer design and then a machine that basically takes the materials that you want to deposit and moves a print head in 3-dimensional space to deposit those materials and build them up layer by layer. Or in some cases, omnidirectionally. We have a sort of a free-form patterning process. But that computer-controlled robot, if you will, can move in 3 axes over time.
That's fantastic. Is the Octobot being used yet?
So the Octobot is more of I believe more of a marker for the field. And now you can see many other groups around the world trying to create something similar. I think what we did was pioneer the concept of being able to have fully embodied energy and intelligence within these soft machines. And many labs around the world are now picking this up and advancing it in new directions.
What do you see as your research path over the next couple of years?
I think the most important work that we're doing right now is the construction of vascularized human tissues. These can be used for bringing new drugs to market faster, safer, with less problems for humans. Disease modeling, things like understanding chronic kidney disease, which affects millions of people worldwide, and ultimately to print these vascularized tissues for tissue regeneration and repair. If we look at the grand challenge, which is creating whole organs, this is really what drives us every single day.
When do you think the first 3D printed tissues might be put into human beings?
That's a great question. I think that we're probably 5 years away from putting in tissue patches, things that could augment existing defective tissues and organs. We're much farther away from doing whole organ replacement.
What advice would you give to a young girl or young boy who wants to become a scientist?
That's a great question. I really want to return to the philosophy of the Liberty Science Center, which is learn by doing. I think getting your hands dirty, making things in your kitchen, working with materials, going outside and exploring nature, because often in our lab we emulate how nature builds. And the more that you can expose yourself to science and to actually physically seeing how things work, I think the more excited you're going to be about science.
Were you a tinkerer as a child?
I was a tinkerer. I definitely, starting with things like building blocks and tinker toys actually, and building things from scratch and using my imagination to create worlds like spaceships and cars and things like that. And I also, I think, was drawn to the field of material science because it really brings together physics and chemistry and engineering all in a single field.
Nice.
And so it allows you to combine science and engineering in a very exciting way.
That's wonderful. You're inspiring.
I wish we could all be together in person and I could see the Liberty Science Center, but I hope to come down sometime and really visit it once we get back to whatever normal is going to be.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis, and thank you, Laura. And Dr. Lewis, you're welcome to visit anytime once it's safe. Let's go elsewhere in Cambridge now and bring on another Harvard professor, the eminent geneticist and serial biotech entrepreneur, George Church, who received LSE's Genius Award in 2018 for his pioneering work in mapping the human genome. Tonight, Dr. Church is one of our COVID challengers. Dr. Church, are you there? George? All right. How's your science going during COVID?
Yeah, so some labs had to shut down during the lockdown. Ours, since we were working on virology and immunology, we pivoted to various aspects of COVID research. including vaccines, and we also continued any work that was computational because that could be done from home.
Tell me about the candidate COVID vaccine that you're testing on yourself.
Yeah, so we have a number of projects that are aimed at conventional, FDA-approved clinical trials, and the RADVAC approach is to kind of be more transparent about the process by which you go from an idea to one of those clinical trials, and to demystify vaccines for the public.
Mm-hmm.
And so we published it as a recipe, and we tested it on the scientists, on ourselves, as has often been the case for vaccines past and present. It's just people aren't typically as transparent about it.
Didn't Louis Pasteur test the rabies vaccine on himself?
There's hundreds of examples. Yellow fever. Exceptional would be the ones where you have evidence that there was not tested on one of the people involved.
Is this the first vaccine you've tested on yourself?
Yes, it is. I mean, first of all, this is very more user-friendly in the sense it's a nasal squirt. So it's like many people will give themselves a little squirt, while many people are not fond of needles, whether it's self-administered or by physicians. Out of 207 vaccines that are in development right now for COVID, only about 6 of them involve intranasal delivery, and ours is the only one that also involves peptides and chitosan as an adjuvant.
How does your vaccine work?
It's very, very high safety, low risk, because there's no viral particles involved at all. It's just little peptides, little pieces of proteins, not even whole proteins, and they're carefully selected from the literature as being highly immunodominant. The delivery nanoparticle is chitosan based. So chitosan is a polysaccharide that is present in a lot of arthropods, insects, and shrimp, and fungal cell walls. And anyway, that makes nanoparticles, and so the combination of peptides, nanoparticles, and intranasal is what distinguishes this from all the other vaccines. Another nice thing about this vaccine is it's totally up to date. So some of the latest peptides that we're taking right now are only 2 weeks old from the peer-reviewed literature.
When do you think you'll know whether it's effective?
I think we'll know for this particular cohort, which is about 20 people. We'll know in a couple of months.
The vaccine hasn't gone through conventional safety tests. Speak about the ethics of publishing the recipe and making it available.
I'm a big fan of the FDA, and this is not really an attempt to go around, but to as a pre-research step and a way of demystifying for the public. To do that safely, the benefits have to outweigh the risks. So some of the risks are getting exposed to medical environments where there's a high density of patients. That's one risk. Getting the disease by a whole variety of means before the official vaccines are approved is another risk. This category of using chitosan with peptides is something that's been fairly well vetted to at least be safe. So really the worst case is it's not effective, and as long as no one's misrepresenting that or making a lot of money misrepresenting that, that is not a huge risk to have something that's safe but ineffective. We're hoping that this one's effective. It has a good chance of being more effective because if you do an intramuscular injection, that doesn't really necessarily provide you the immunity that you get, intranasal, which is much closer to the respiratory infection starting point.
Should DIY vaccine efforts be regulated?
Well, there are regulations about use of drugs in general, and it includes DIY in principle. I think it is reasonable to not spend a lot of money enforcing it when one individual is doing no harm to him or herself.
You're technically in violation of the regulations, no?
It depends. So if you're not distributing a drug to anybody else, and you're using things that are generally recognized as safe, then that would be acceptable. If you're a little bit off of that, then it would be a gray zone that would require, legal insight that I don't have.
Okay, that's fair. I wish you all the success with this. It would be wonderful for you and the world if the vaccine works. As always, thank you, Dr. Church.
Yeah, take care.
Next up, we have our I Stand for Science student heroes, 3 New Jersey teenagers who are already succeeding as scientists. Here to talk to them about their accomplishments and aspirations is Jersey City Mayor Stephen Fulop.
Thanks, Paul. I'm joined by Jagdeep Bhatia of Greenbrook, who is now a freshman at MIT. I'm joined by Taylor Brown, a senior at Monroe Township High School. And I'm joined here today by Ramsey Saber, who's a senior at Union City's Jose Marti STEM Academy. So let's start with you, Jagdeep. I understand that you recently won an award for $175,000, a national science competition. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the project?
Sure. So my research was in machine learning, which is this really cool technology that allows us to teach a computer something without explicitly programming it. But one of the biggest issues with machine learning is how much data is required. So just teaching a machine that this is an image of a cat and this is an image of a dog, it takes millions and millions of pictures. So what I did in my research was I worked in what's called interactive learning, where a computer or a machine learns by asking questions and receiving feedback from a very knowledgeable teacher. Oftentimes that's a human. And what I designed was a process or an algorithm by which the computer could ask just the right questions to the teacher to receive the best possible feedback and learn in the fastest amount of time using the least amount of data.
How would a computer be asking a teacher questions? What type of questions, and how quickly would that happen?
In the future, we could have a robot, like a surgical robot, that adapts to an individual person's anatomy while it's doing a procedure, or a factory robot where the robot is like learning a human's patterns and habits so that the two work effectively together.
We'll move over to Taylor here. So Taylor, I understand that you recently won a competition here at Liberty Science Center focused on a project that you did related to COVID and the impact on opening indoor recreational facilities. Obviously in my job, I'm interested in your feedback on that. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
I was one of 19 participants in the Partners in Science program here at the Liberty Science Center, and we each got assigned different research fields. And being as COVID is such a big part of our lives today, it was something that really interested me. So I became a certified contact tracer through Johns Hopkins program on Coursera. And from there, I was able to start doing some local projects, mainly through the NJSBA, and promoting digital learning, promoting safe learning environments. And then from there, I was able to work with the Liberty Science Center to create a safe space. So specifically going through the exhibits, looking, can we open this one? Is it possible to modify this exhibit without losing what you were supposed to be learning? And from there, we implemented some safety guidelines, wearing masks, washing our hands frequently, limiting the hours for cleaning, things like that. Basically just to build the Liberty Science back to what it once was, but still create a safe space for everyone.
And now let's move over to Ramsey Saber. I understand, Ramsey, you recently discovered a planet. So with the planet you found, what's the name of the planet and how does that work?
Well, my high school project really started when I was a freshman, when I was 14 years old. We have this program where we decide to go into school and research whatever we like. And I really liked space, so I stumbled upon this article from MIT, where basically a bunch of scientists discovered a cluster of stars from 100 to 500 light years away from here. And these were thousands of stars. And of course, if there are stars, there might be planets. So what the article was looking for were participants in the community who are avid in space exploration, preferably people with PhDs or masters that want to do their thesis. But I was really interested in this. And I emailed them, and eventually I got an email back giving me access to some different data. And going onto the databases and data, I saw things that I was like, oh man, what is going on here? How am I going to do all this math? And what am I even looking at? But my mind always kept going back to the same place. If I have the chance to actually discover a planet here that no one has discovered before, I should really dig into this, no matter what obstacles come my way. So I asked a lot of my teachers for help. I did some online learning through the computer to see what I was looking at. And after a while, I did get mathematical signs that there is a planet orbiting this one specific star system. After a while, I spent my whole high school years, freshman, sophomore, and junior year, trying to get this hypothetical at this point planet caught in orbit. So in my junior year, during the summer, I went to Seton Hall University, where they have the most powerful telescope in the state. And I spent weeks there trying to get this planet in orbit. And after predicting the exact time it'll be caught in our direction, I actually managed to get a picture of this planet in orbit. And after some more deeper research, I managed to get the chemistry behind it as well. It's a hot Jupiter, basically. It's like our Jupiter, but 4 times bigger and extremely close to its star. So it's very hot. And I managed to get this through Seton Hall University and, of course, the help of my school. And altogether, I really hope to dig deeper into this whole exoplanet hunting field. And, hopefully keep finding more and more until I find one that may contain life, which is the goal of all exoplanet hunting.
What's the name of the planet?
Well, right now, how astronomy works is that unfortunately I can't name it something that I like. Maybe if I go on different, interviews and something more leisurely, I can name it what I want. But for, professional sakes, they name it the name of the star, which is HD 92788 dash a letter, which corresponds to how many planets have already been discovered before that have been orbiting this star.
How many planets are orbiting that star right now?
So this star already has 2 discovered planets, but with mine, it'll be a 3rd. So it'll be called HD 92788c.
It's amazing.
Thank you so much.
My high school resume, chess club. Ramsey's high school resume, found a new planet. Thank you, Ramsey, Taylor, and Jagdeep. With talent like yours, the future of the world is in very good hands. And thank you, Mayor Fulop. I love LSC's iconic Hoberman Sphere. It has opened 5,802,028 times since LSC opened in 1993. My job at LSC is easy because we have a terrific, hardworking staff who are dedicated to our mission of inspiring the next generation of scientists and engineers. I'm just the conductor of a wonderful orchestra. To use another metaphor, it takes a village to raise an impactful science center. I wish I had the time to thank our entire staff by name. I value every one of you. Let me thank by name our executive team. Christine Arnold Schroeder, Iowaka Barber, Amanda Cunningham, Tamora Kusha, Paul Marsh, Liza Rawson, and Ivory Williams. Liberty Science Center is fortunate to have a dedicated and effective board of trustees. They are our fundraisers, our friend raisers, and our idea partners. I want to thank our co-chairs, David Barry and Steve Howe. Our vice chairs, Alma Dimitropoulos and Laura Overdeck. Our treasurer, Bruce Levy, our chairman emeritus, Josh Weston, our other managing trustees, Susan Axelrod, Fred Bertolo, Chris Borner, Sherry Bronstein, Jennifer Chalsty, David Daly, Mike DeMarco, Bob Hariri, Richard Hodosh, Sam Kishi, Jeff Mandler, Nevins McCann, Chirag Patel, Tony Skiatis, Carolyn Slasky, Tom Stanton, Vijay Swarup, Greg Tusar, and Linda Willett. Our advisory trustees, Brian Carlin, Janet Denlinger, Michelle Holcomb, Ganga Cannon, Margaret Lanning, Minal Patel, Amit Rakit, David Rosenberg, John Willian, and Jerry Zeldis. And finally, the trustees of our separate board for SciTech City, Dave Berry, Samit Shabria, Alma Dimitropoulos, Richard Hodosh, David O'Brien, Greg Tusar, Josh Weston, and Norm Worthington. I want to bring on another COVID challenger, Dr. Perry Halkitis, Dean of Rutgers School of Public Health and a research psychologist who has spent 25 years studying the health of LGBTQ people. Rutgers is supporting the New Jersey Health Department in setting up a statewide COVID-19 contact tracing program. Dr. Halkitis?
Hi.
How many contact tracers do we have and how many do we need?
So at the end of the summer, 2020, we have about 1,500 to 2,000 contact tracers throughout the state of New Jersey who are deployed through the various counties and local health departments to do their work. Estimates suggest we need somewhere in the vicinity of 3,500 to 4,000 contact tracers to be able to do the work effectively, given the second wave that we're expecting to happen over the course of the end of 2020.
So what are the obstacles to getting more tracers?
I think New Jerseyans have been extremely willing to become contact tracers, which has warmed my heart enormously. So the challenge at the beginning, in terms of getting contact tracers, was to educate the public about what it is. Fortunately, the New Jersey Department of Health did something really intelligent, which is partner with us at the Rutgers School of Public Health to bring in students as the first wave of contact tracers. So our students who are studying public health were aware of what contact tracing was and were willing to enroll, to be trained for 18 hours, and to become the first set of tracers that were deployed out into the state through all of the counties.
If someone wants to become a contact tracer, what do they do?
To become a contact tracer, the New Jersey Department of Health has a really terrific contact tracing website that not only has information about the epidemiology of the disease and the symptoms of the disease and what you do if you're sick, but also what contact tracing is and how to become a contact tracer. And at that site, you can provide your information, and then somebody from the state or their agency that they're working with will be in touch with you about becoming a contact tracer. I've always said that contact tracing takes a nosy person, somebody who's curious, somebody who's willing to ask questions. So if you're willing to be persistent and ask questions and dig into people's life to find out who their contacts are, this might be a really terrific job for you. It's like being a detective.
As a public health researcher, what surprised you about people's reactions to the COVID crisis?
It's interesting for me to be living through this COVID pandemic because I was a young man growing up in New York City when the AIDS epidemic hit. And there was a lot of chaos, and there was a lot of fear, and there was a lot of anxiety, and there was a lot of misinformation, and there was a lot of stigma. And it's amazing to me, and what surprised me the most was how similar the anxiety and the fear and the stigma felt again with COVID-19. And I thought we had evolved from that. I thought we had learned from the AIDS epidemic. But, you know, while we have learned some things, human beings continue to operate in ways that are not always rational. So not wearing masks, not believing that COVID-19 is real, all of these mythologies which perpetuated the disease, that's what surprised me and, quite frankly, upset me the most.
How has the pandemic affected the LGBTQ population? Any differently than other populations?
Yeah, the LGBTQ population, like other marginalized populations in our country, whether we talk about people of color or we talk about women or we talk about immigrants, often experience more health disparities than the general population. And so for the last 25 years of my life, I've been studying the health of LGBTQ people and examining how social conditions and policies and laws affect their health. And I have every reason to believe, my hypothesis is as a scientist, that as a marginalized population, LGBTQ people are going to be subjected to infection at potentially higher rates and potential mortality at higher rates. I just finished undertaking a nationwide survey on COVID-19 experiences and disease and access to testing and obstacles to testing in LGBTQ people, over 1,000 LGBTQ people, and we're just crunching the data right now. But I will tell you just preliminarily, many report symptoms and few were able to access a test. To me, that's an issue. To me, that's a health disparity.
What about high-risk behavior? Does that change at times like this?
So biological, psychological, and behavioral and social phenomena all interact with each other. When people are stressed, when people experience stigma, they tend to engage in risk. We are seeing right now in the United States higher levels of intimate partner violence. We are going to see increases in alcohol, tobacco, and other drug use, all because of COVID. And there's a question as to the extent to which COVID-19 as a stressor is also perpetuating risk like sexual risk in populations. It's interesting, right? Because this is like a dual-edged sword. Unlike HIV, which is very difficult to transmit, COVID-19 is very easy to transmit. So people are being conscious of the possibility of transmitting the virus easily. So I don't know, I will tell you as soon as my analysis is over, the extent to which sexual risk has increased, but certainly mental health risk, certain alcohol risk, tobacco risk, and other drug risk are all higher than they were prior to the pandemic.
Thank you, Dr. Halkitis. I would now like to introduce the co-chair of LSE's board, Steve Howe, Chairman Emeritus Ernst & Young. He joined LSE as a managing trustee in January 2019 and became co-chair in June 2019. When Steve retired from EY after a 36-year career, he was CEO of the US and Americas. Steve and I have been working together since EY became the founding corporate sponsor of SciTech City, and he has been a wonderful thought partner to me in helping drive the growth of LSE and SciTech City. Please welcome Steve Howe.
Thank you, Paul. I want to thank all of our Genius Gala chairs and co-chairs who made this evening possible and gave generously to LSC. First, our two corporate chairs, Michael and Sarah, and Gary D. St. Hilaire. Our three innovation chairs, Jennifer Chalsty, Alma Dimitropoulos, and Josh Weston. And our 11 Genius Gala co-chairs, David Barry, Christopher Borner, Sherry Bronstein, David Daly, Matthew Ellis, Bruce Levy, Jeffrey Mandler, Laura Bilodeau Overdeck and John Overdeck, Carlos Rodriguez, Gregory Tussar, Susan Keating, and Norman Worthington. One of the joys of joining a new board is getting to know a new set of interesting people. Through LSC, I've had the honor of getting to know Josh Weston, my predecessor as co-chair of LSC's Board of Trustees. Josh was an executive at J. Crew and then CEO of ADP. Well, he has not gone off into retirement, but has a full schedule helping Liberty Science Center and other nonprofits that he values. Josh and his wife Judy provided the entire funding for LSC's beautiful new Weston Family Art and Science Pavilion, the first physical extension of LSC in 13 years. We completed this pavilion during the COVID closure, and it will eventually house exhibitions that blur the line between art and science. Josh, are you here?
Thank you, Steve. Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to join all of you watching this evening, and to say it up front, I stand for science. I have the pleasure of introducing our next guest tonight. She grew up in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, before moving to Virginia to pursue her undergraduate degrees. In 2018, she graduated with honors from Virginia Tech with dual Bachelor of Science degrees in biochemistry and in systems biology, and she is currently pursuing a Doctor of Pharmacy at Virginia Commonwealth University. And did I mention that in addition to those titles, she holds one that may surprise you. Miss America 2019. Her outstanding talent was to conduct an experiment on stage, the catalytic decomposition of hydrogen peroxide. Her unique talent performance and focus on women in STEM has sparked a positive reaction wherever she goes. She is also the only Miss America in history to hold the title for 2 years due to the COVID-19 virus. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Camille Schrier.
Thank you so much, Josh, and thank you to Liberty Science Center for having me today. I cannot wait to show you guys my favorite chemistry demonstration. And one of the reasons that this is my favorite is because it is the one that helped me win Miss America. How cool is that? And so I'm Camille Schrier, Miss America 2020, and I am the first Miss America to ever win using science as her talent, because science is a talent and it's so important and really, really fun and cool and easy to understand. So let's get into my favorite demonstration. Now, anytime that we do science, we have to make sure that we are protected. And so you'll notice that I have my lab coat on. I'm going to go ahead and button that up very quickly. And I'm also going to put on some other personal protective equipment, like gloves to make sure that I don't burn my hands. And I'm also going to put on a pair of safety goggles. And mine are pink because even though science, we have to be safe, it doesn't mean that we can't have fun. So I have my pink safety goggles on, my gloves, and I have my lab coat. And I also have my hair in a ponytail, which is really important as well. But let's get into the fun part. This demonstration is called elephant's toothpaste, and it is formally known as the catalytic decomposition of hydrogen peroxide. And that is a lot of fancy words for we break down hydrogen peroxide really fast using a little motor. And so in my tiny flasks, I have hydrogen peroxide, food coloring, and dish soap. That's all that's in here. But the hydrogen peroxide that I put in here is so much more concentrated than what you have in your medicine cabinet. The one that I have in here is 35% hydrogen peroxide versus what you might buy in the pharmacy is around 3%. So this is 12 times more concentrated, can burn your hands and burn your skin, so you have to be super careful. But we want to break this down really fast. And maybe you've seen hydrogen peroxide in the pharmacy. It's usually in a brown bottle. That is because it breaks down all the time with things like light. That's what's blocking out the light, is that dark bottle. It also breaks down with just time. But I'm impatient, and so I like to have my demonstrations go really fast. And I only had 90 seconds on stage at Miss America. So we are going to use something to help us, and that is called a catalyst. You might have heard that word before, but in chemistry, what a catalyst is it is a helper that speeds up a reaction, actually brings down the activation energy, which is how much energy you need to start the reaction. But more importantly, it is not consumed during the reaction. So if you think of a motor on a car, it's kind of like the motor rather than the gasoline. So you would put gasoline in to make the engine start running, but that gasoline runs out at the end. But the motor is still there. So this is going to be our motor that makes our hydrogen peroxide break down really fast. And when we break down hydrogen peroxide, it is H2O2. Sounds a lot like water. We end up with water, H2O, and oxygen, O2, gas. And if we have gas come out of a liquid, that sounds a lot like making bubbles, right? And so what we can do is I added dish soap into these that are going to actually trap all the bubbles, and it's going to make a beautiful foam come out of my tiny flasks. So that's the science behind this, but I have to tell you, it is really visual, it is really fun, and it is really messy. So let's get this started. I'm going to put in my catalyst. This is actually a chemical catalyst called potassium iodide. Are you ready? Let's count this down from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oop, didn't put enough in there. Now I have to be honest, this is a little bit smaller than the one that I did at Miss America because it gets crazy big and messy. The one I did at Miss America went about 17 or 18 feet in the air, and I used about 200 times more volume of chemicals. So I get to bring science to kids and adults across the country and show them why it is so exciting and relevant. And that is really what I talk about. Science is all around us. This is fun, but this is not what the science really is in our world. Science is in computer technology. Science is in our cell phone. Science is in the plastic cup that you might have drank out of this morning. Science touches every product that we touch every single day. And I hope that you think of the science behind everything that you touch going on the rest of your day, and remember that science really is all around us.
That was great. Thank you. When did you do your first science experiment?
Oh my gosh. I have only been doing science demonstrations for about a year and a half as I started to compete in the Miss America organization, but I had been a science student and really enjoyed laboratory-based sciences and doing experiments throughout my education for pretty much my whole life.
You have a degree in two fields, biochemistry and systems biology. What is systems biology?
That's a good question. And I always say that I have one degree that everyone knows what it is and another degree that no one knows what it is. So I'm glad you asked that. Systems biology is basically using math and computer science to solve biological and medical problems. So thinking of large-scale data sets of biological or medical data, finding ways that we can use computer technologies to analyze that data for us. A human can only do so much, but we can't analyze, a million pieces of data and come up with a pattern. Our brains don't work that way, but computers work really well to do that. And so another word that systems biology is described as is bioinformatics, and that's a more hot topic right now that people might know of. But computers meets biology is the best way to describe it.
I understand that you have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. What's that, and how does it affect your life?
It is basically that one of my types of collagen, you have many types in your body, one of my types of collagen doesn't work properly. So I have a genetic mutation that causes that not to work. I got it from my mom. And for me, that means that I have hypermobility, so I stretch really easily. I kind of look like I could be a contortionist. My joints can get injured from that. I also have chronic fatigue syndrome, which makes my job as Miss America sometimes really difficult. I have scoliosis. I have a lot of other physical implications that basically gives me a silent physical disability that no one would really know that I have unless I tell them. But it's really opened my eyes to people with invisible illnesses where you could be walking down the street and see someone and you don't know what they're going through. They could have a disease like Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and struggle, but you aren't sure. And so it definitely gives me respect and empathy for others. But when I started to learn about Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, I got really interested in genetics because I wanted to know how did we find out what this was caused by? And gosh, where in my genes is this? So I love genetic science. I literally love it so much that I asked one Christmas for myself and my entire family to get 23andMe genetic testing kits. And I used some of that information in a senior project for bioinformatics where I was trying to find a gene marker for Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. My type does not have a genetic test yet, but genetic testing is rapidly evolving. And so I'm hoping that one time soon we'll be able to have a genetic test and a marker for Ehlers-Danlos of my type.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Liberty Science Center has two striking architectural features that define the center's visual identity. The giant dome of the Jennifer Chalsey Planetarium and our 163-foot tall pyramidal tower, which is viewable from miles away. The observation floor at the top of the tower, where I am right now, has stunning 360-degree views of Lower Manhattan, the Statue of Liberty, Jersey City, the Verrazano Bridge, Ellis Island. It's incredible. But this is a challenging space to use for events or classes because there are no restrooms, no kitchen facilities, and the glass roof leaks badly. The late Betty Wall Johnson, may she rest in peace, left LSC $5 million to transform this space into LSC's most impactful and dramatic learning space. We're doing that by adding a second floor in the hollow tower shaft below me. That's where we'll put bathrooms, a kitchen, and a beautiful classroom. This floor will become the LSC Tower Observatory, a venue for special events, and a place where students make atmospheric and solar observations by day and track the moon, bright stars, and planets by night. Our final COVID challenger is Dr. Tal Zaks, Chief Medical Officer at Moderna Therapeutics, the company that is conducting the U.S.'s first phase 3 clinical trial of a potential COVID-19 vaccine. Hi.
Yes, Paul. Good evening, and thanks for having me here.
Traditionally, vaccines are made of weakened or attenuated virus or pieces of virus. Yours is not. How does it work?
What we've done is really leverage the phenomenal advancement in science over the past several years to translate into a completely new way of making a vaccine. And what we do is, as opposed to start with a virus, or as you say, a weakened or inactivated form of it, we actually now have the genetic information of what the virus codes for. And we basically use that information. Think of it as the software of drug development, just like in a computer. What we do is we take the information that the virus uses to encode for its various bits and pieces, and we just take that piece of information that encodes for the most critical piece for our body to recognize, for the immune system to see, and we make a vaccine out of that. So that our vaccines, in the end, they have nothing to do with the actual physical virus. In fact, we've never had the virus in our building, and it's why we could get started within 2 days of the sequence being known, because we never needed the actual virus. It's just information.
In December, the disease struck Wuhan, China. On January 11th, Chinese researchers published the genome of the virus. On January 13th, you made an announcement.
That's absolutely right. So on the 13th, we put it into production. We had figured out what the sequence was. And, based on the scientific understanding of these viruses, this and its cousin SARS, we knew that you wanted to go after the spike protein. That's the bit that the immune system needs to recognize. So we knew what to hone in on. And so together with the National Institutes of Health, and we've had an ongoing collaboration with them, we were able to put this straight away into production. So that happened on the 13th. On the 14th at midnight, my wife makes me up in cold sweat, says, "What if you got the sequence wrong? Did you double check?" And so what I did was, of course, start emailing frantically, and thankfully there are people smarter than me in the company that, of course, verified this 10 times till Sunday to make sure that that first sequence was actually verified by other labs that were also cloning the virus. And so we had the certainty that indeed we got the sequence right.
Let's get a little wonkier on the science. It's messenger RNA. Tell me about that.
So every life form as we know it has messenger RNA. It is part of what's called the central dogma of biology, which is to say that all of our genetic information is encoded in our genes. That's DNA. And yet every cell makes a different activity, and it's based on the proteins that that cell makes. The cell I have on the skin of my nose is not the same cell as I have in my eye, or a neuron, or a muscle cell. So what makes cells different if all of them have the same genes? Well, it turns out that the part of the gene that the cell needs to know to go make protein is a transient bit that's encoded by the messenger RNA. And so the central dogma of biology is you start from the gene, from the DNA, and then it goes through an intermediary, this messenger RNA. It's a temporary copy. It's in our cells for 24, 48 hours and then gets degraded. But it's enough time to instruct the cell's protein-making machinery to go make a protein. And so our vaccine platform is essentially taking that middle step where you encode the information from the gene, and we say, hold on, that's our drug or that's our vaccine. And so a messenger RNA vaccine for SARS is essentially a messenger RNA molecule that encodes for that spike protein. We give it with an intramuscular injection, and it teaches our body's own cells to go make that SARS spike protein. Our body will never have seen the virus, but our body is now making the protein, that critical protein that the virus would have made had we been infected, as a way to educate the immune system to recognize the virus should we see it again in real life. That's what the immunization is all about.
On March 16th, you administered the first dose to a patient. How many other patients were in that trial?
We had 45 adults. In May, we announced the results, and indeed, we have been able to show that everyone who got our vaccine is now generating antibodies, that piece in our blood, the protein that blocks the virus. And indeed, we were able to show that every one of the people who gets the vaccine actually generates antibodies that can neutralize the virus. And so that's what makes us optimistic to continue the development, and indeed to continue the story. On July 27th, we started the large phase 3 trial, 30,000 people, half of them getting the vaccine, half of them getting the placebo.
So the next step in your trial of 30,000 people is to actually show that the antibodies stop you from getting the disease.
That's absolutely right, Paul. So now the proof is in the pudding. What we need to show is that indeed, yes, we generate the antibodies, but let's make sure and let's prove conclusively that making the antibodies leads to preventing COVID-19 disease. And so we're doing this in the United States. As we all know and are aware, there are high levels of transmission going around in the country. We've gone to places where transmission is active, unfortunately, and is going on. And the goal of the study is to give half the participants the active vaccine and half a comparator, a placebo, and then see the cases that occur naturally because of transmission. Now, here's the paradox. The worse it is in terms of ongoing infection rates, the sooner we will know that the vaccine works, because knowing is dependent on actually people in the trial getting infected.
You're pretty confident that having the antibody response is going to protect you, correct?
I am. And the reason is, if I've learned anything in my life in drug development, it's that if you follow the science, you're likely to go right. I think if you look at the stepwise approach here, we know that it's the spike protein that matters. We know that neutralizing antibodies can block infection. It's been proven in every species. We know that this vaccine can block infection. That's been proven in every species we've tested. We know that we have a dose that can generate neutralizing antibodies to the same level that patients had. And we know that patients tend to be protected, at least for the ensuing months, from getting sick again. So you connect the scientific dots, that lives you with optimism. And at the end of the day, you know, this is a scientific process, Paul, and I stand for science.
Me too. Thank you, Dr. Zaks.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for all you're doing. I appreciate the support.
It's time for our third and final Genius Award. Here to present the award is David Berry, co-chair of LSE's Board of Trustees. David is president and CEO of Irby and of Iron State Development Company. He is helping me and LSE drive the creation of SciTech City, and along with other area developers, generously pledged $5 million to the SciTech City effort. Take it away, Dave.
Good evening, everyone. For someone like myself who has been fortunate enough to be involved with construction projects both here and abroad, the opportunity to introduce our final honoree of the evening truly has special meaning. His first major project, Habitat 67, for the 1967 World's Fair, launched a spectacular career that includes some of the most high-profile architectural icons of the 20th and 21st centuries. Even today, he keeps an amazing schedule of international projects and travel that has only been slowed down by the COVID pandemic. Let's roll that video on our final honoree of the evening.
When discussing the groundbreaking architectural designs of Moshe Safdie, the word iconic does not seem adequate. Each building design by this internationally acclaimed architect beautifully reflects and embodies the spirit and purpose for which it was built. In the movie Crazy Rich Asians, Safdie's monumental Marina Bay Sands integrated resort on the Singapore waterfront virtually becomes a main character. Completed in 2011, the three 55-story towers of the hotel are connected by the breathtaking elevated Sky Park, featuring cantilevered spaces, a one-of-a-kind infinity edge pool, gardens, restaurants, and a public observation deck. Safdie was born in Haifa on July 14, 1938, in what was then the British Mandate of Palestine. His Sephardic Jewish family was of Syrian and Lebanese descent. In 1954, his family moved to Montreal, where in 1961, Safdie received his master's degree in architecture from McGill University. After apprenticing with Louis Kahn in Philadelphia, Safdie returned to Montreal to oversee the master plan for the Expo 67 World's Fair. He later established his own firm in order to undertake the design and construction of Habitat 67, an adaptation of his undergraduate thesis and major theme exhibition of the fair. A landmark demonstration project, it pioneered a vision for urban housing using the technology of prefabricated construction. As a breakthrough building type that continues to resonate today, Habitat 67 creates a vital neighborhood with open spaces, garden terraces, and many other amenities typically reserved for the single-family home, adapted to a high-density city environment. Each of the 158 units had its own roof garden, while pedestrian bridges and elevated streets, now a signature to many of his designs, add public space and contribute to community building. Internationally recognized, Habitat 67 is considered a major development in urban architecture. Hallmarks of Safdie's buildings are dramatic curves, light, water, and open public and green spaces. Embracing a comprehensive and humane design philosophy in his buildings and writings, he has always stressed the importance of meaningful spaces that enhance community and the need to understand the essence of of a particular locale's geography and culture. With huge multi-use buildings in Singapore and China, Safdie has continued to work at the mega scale. Today's megacities have densities 30, 40, and 50 times what cities were 100 years ago.
These kinds of densities threaten everything we love about life, daylight, a sense of identity, a sense of view.
We haven't got a clue, Safdie says, about how to deploy tall buildings into wholesome, workable urbanism. Safdie is being modest. Other architects may not have a clue, but he certainly does. His buildings preserve and amplify the fundamental things that make human life worth living. Safdie's best-known works include the Skirball Cultural Center in Los Angeles, 30 years in the making and woven into the landscape of the Santa Monica Mountains. Yad Vashem Holocaust History Museum in Jerusalem. The Hoffman Center for the Performing Arts in Kansas City, Missouri. The National Gallery of Canada in Ottawa. The United States Institute of Peace Headquarters on the Mall in Washington, D.C. The Khalsa Heritage Center, the National Museum of the Sikh People in Punjab, India. And Crystal Bridges Museum of American Arts in Bentonville, Arkansas, founded by Walmart heiress Alice Walton. Most recently, Safdie's work has been spotlighted for Jewel Changi Airport, a new building typology that combines two environments, an intense marketplace and a paradise garden, to reimagine the center of an airport as a major public realm. Set to fully open later this year, Raffles City Chongqing, a mixed-use development of over 800,000 square meters of housing, office, retail, transportation, and hotel programs, will include a diversely programmed 300-meter-long sky bridge, set to be the highest in the world at the time of completion. Safdie has taught at McGill, Ben-Gurion, and Yale universities, and after moving his firm's offices to Boston in 1978, became director of the Urban Design Program at Harvard University's Graduate School of Design. An architect, urban planner, educator, theorist, and author, Safdie has published 7 books on architecture and garnered numerous awards, honorary degrees, and civilian honors, including the Companion of the Order of Canada, the Gold Medal of the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada, and a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Smithsonian Institute of National Design. Recently, he was awarded the Wolf Prize in Architecture for a career motivated by the social concerns of architecture and formal experimentation. So what do you call an individual who designs only iconic buildings? A Liberty Science Center genius. Moshe, Liberty Science Center is pleased to bestow on you the 2020 Genius Award.
I'm deeply honored to receive this award. In fact, I think architect is one of those disciplines where art and science fuse together. It is impossible to draw a line. I've always been disturbed by this separation of art and science as a mode of thinking. Nothing is more inspiring than seeing how fitness to purpose evolves both in the organic and inorganic world. And so it is this inspiration by science that makes me so happy to receive this award and wish on all the young people who are going forward, science should be a basic building block of your education, no matter what you want to do later in life. Thank you.
Thank you, Moshe. We often tell young people that careers aren't straight and narrow, that you can learn from your failures and make mistakes. What failures or mistakes have you learned from?
When I began my work as an architect, I became very interested in the Platonic solids, in complex geometry of space packing, and it had a lot of impact on my work in the sense that I began playing around with the geometries as I designed buildings. And so a brief moment, I designed a number of buildings were completely formalist in the sense that they somehow forgot that there's a program to be solved. I designed a school in which each class was a different level. As you moved from place to place, you were just changing levels every moment. I was obsessed with how geometry was pure and workable. And when I thought back some years later, I thought, how crazy was that? Does it really make sense to have a school where everybody's changing levels every time they change classes or go to the gym? So here's a good example of sort of getting obsessed as an architect with some formal idea which sets you astray, but then hopefully you see the bigger picture, you see the light. Architecture is all about balancing things, not getting obsessed with one thing.
By the way, I was obsessed with Habitat 67. My parents took me to Montreal at Expo 67 when I was 11 years old.
Oh, you went there. That's wonderful.
I remember it well. Could you riff for a moment on what you think your profession is doing well and what it needs to do better?
I think my profession, as a generalization, you got to lump a lot of ideas and schools of thought together, has two major faults. It is still obsessed, we used the word obsessed before, with formalism, with form making for its own sake, with less regard to the livability, to the life intended in a building as a major forming element in the design, and are prone to sensationalism. I think another problem with our profession is that they've kind of given up on the big picture. It used to be that you could not put forward an architectural concept without somehow having a reciprocal urban concept. How do individual buildings create a city? How do they aggregate and compound to be something greater than the individual parts? And I think we must reaffirm our commitment to the city as a whole, to the environment we live in.
Has the pandemic affected your thinking about architecture?
The pandemic has actually reaffirmed some of my ideas and concepts about architecture. And I will elaborate. I got a call from a friend who lives in New York. She's an eminent city planner. She lives in a luxury apartment on the west side. And in the middle of the pandemic, she goes to me, she says, I'm going crazy. I'm in this luxury building. I can't open the windows. I don't have a balcony. I can't go out. There must be a law. You must have openable windows. You must have a balcony as a minimum, if not a bigger outdoor space. And I said, oh, really? You know, I've been saying that for 50 years, for everyone a garden. Every dwelling must have a reciprocal outdoor space. But apart from that, I think that through the pandemic, some people have said, oh, from now on, people will want to work home. We don't need to have office buildings. We don't have to get together. We can have all these meetings all through the internet, and that's it, all virtual. I've learned that the opposite is true during the pandemic. Yes, we work successfully, 80 people here in this office, virtually for several months. But when it came to real creativity, to having to create new designs, to have to get together, brainstorm, make models, we had to get physically together. It didn't work otherwise. So I come out of a pandemic with a conclusion that A, there's no replacement for face-to-face interaction. And the other conclusion is the public realm is really important. The places in the city that bring us together, they are very important, and they ought to be better than the malls. They ought to go back to the richness of indoor and outdoor and parks and gathering places full of culture and commerce and other activities, not single-use shopping centers as a substitution for what stands for public realm.
Thank you, Moshe. That's very inspiring.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it as well.
The last 6 months have been challenging for all of us in different ways. The novel coronavirus has claimed more than 900,000 lives worldwide. Forest fires have ravaged the western U.S. Sea levels haven't stopped rising. Violent racism and xenophobia persist. And yet there is great reason for middle-term and long-term optimism, and you've seen it here tonight. It is science and brilliant men and women of science whose work can create a better future for everyone. Men like Moshe Safdie, who is making the densest places on Earth more habitable and more nourishing to the human spirit. Women like Jennifer Lewis, who is leading the way to 3D print human organs and potentially save the lives of hundreds of thousands of people who desperately need organ transplants. During COVID-19, while too many world leaders slung mud at each other, downplayed the severity of the disease, and slammed borders shut, scientists from across the globe ignored borders and came together as never before with the one shared purpose of defeating the highly contagious virus. Women and men of science don't know nationalities or borders. They know the search for truth about the natural world and the quest for discoveries and innovations that will help humankind. The first reports of a new pneumonia-like disease came from the Chinese city of Wuhan in December. Chinese health officials initially acknowledged 59 cases clustered around the Hunan seafood market, which also sold pangolin and other exotic wild meats. The Chinese government came under attack for minimizing the number of cases, muffling the voices of early warners, disguising the true origin of the disease, even accused of manufacturing the virus in a lab. Governments do their thing, and my aim is not to adjudicate the evilness or benevolence of Beijing or of any other national government. On January 11th, the first COVID-19 death in Wuhan was announced, a 61-year-old man. That very same day, scientists in China published for all the world to see the genetic sequence of COVID-19, the nearly 30,000 letters of its genetic code. 2 days later, on January 13th, Tal Zaks and colleagues in Cambridge, Massachusetts, used that publicly available genetic code to identify a candidate vaccine. That's cooperative international hyperdrive science. LSE's mission is to create more scientists and engineers by inspiring our youth to get excited about science. SciTech City's goal is to bring scientists and entrepreneurs together to launch new science and technology companies that change the world. I'm Paul Hoffman. I stand for science. If you stand for science, please join us at Liberty Science Center and SciTech City. Click on the donate button on your screen if you want to make a charitable contribution to LSC. Thank you for spending the evening with us. Good night, stay safe, be strong, have big ideas, follow your dreams.
I stand for science.
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 I stand for science.